Wolfgang Van Halen may be rock and roll royalty, but his journey hasn't always been easy. From having to shut down weird conspiracies to enduring a devastating loss, Eddie Van Halen and Valerie Bertinelli's son has faced a long, difficult road in forging his own legacy. Wolfgang Van Halen's father Eddie had a traumatic childhood, and it's something he rarely spoke about. Eddie did manage to share some of his childhood pain with Valerie Bertinelli during their marriage, but when filming an episode of Behind the Music, Bertinelli was reluctant to share details. However, she did say this about her former husband's upbringing.
It was a very volatile household.
It's thought Eddie's traumatic past is what led to his problems with addiction. When Wolfgang was around 13 years old, his father was battling alcoholism. On Behind the Music, Wolfgang explained that his father had been in and out of rehab multiple times at that point. He was taking pills prescribed to him by these facilities, but it didn't work the way it was supposed to. Soon, he started drinking again.
It would just get dark sometimes. But that was normal. So that's the thing, is it was just part of it.
Wolfgang watched his father go down the deep end when he started mixing medication with alcohol, explaining that eventually he could no longer see his father when he looked in Eddie's eyes. He recalled, "It was like there was nothing there. It's like the pupils were black and there was nothing behind it. And that's where it got really scary." Eddie's struggles with addiction were one of the main reasons he and Bertinelli divorced. On Behind the Music, Eddie's friends and family recalled how hard his addiction was on his marriage, and eventually it crumbled under the pressure. One of Eddie's closest friends, Matt Bruck, recalled what a hard time Eddie had when he was going through his divorce.
I never felt that Ed was ever the same after Val and he broke up.
Wolfgang continued to spend time with his father after the divorce. The two had frequent jam sessions and spent the summer together that year, but it had been very difficult for their family. Wolfgang said, "Mom got a place, Dad had his place. That only made Dad worse. As the divorce was more and more real, that made his more and more real and darker." After his parents' divorce, Wolfgang was well aware of Eddie's struggle with addiction, and he felt responsible for looking after his father. When Eddie's struggle with addiction intensified after his divorce, Wolfgang eventually confronted his father and told him that he had to choose between him and the drugs.
Eventually, after however long, I must have gotten through to him.
After rehab, Eddie rejoined Van Halen, and Wolfgang kept a close eye on him during their 2007 tour. Wolfgang told Screamer magazine, "With me being involved in the first place, it was more for his comfort and his stability. If anything, I was the one who was the patriarch in the situation to a certain extent." He and his father's relationship evolved during this time, with Wolfgang saying they became like two best friends. Wolfgang ultimately replaced Van Halen bassist Michael Anthony on the tour, which left many old-time fans very unhappy. Wolfgang admitted on Behind the Music, "I understand that. It's not easy to be the second guy, but that wasn't my decision. It wasn't my problem.
My problem was making sure my dad was alive."
Having Wolfgang in the band did lead to Eddie's permanent recovery, and he managed to stay sober until his death in 2020. Wolfgang Van Halen was forced to grow up fast. He told Rolling Stone, "I had to mature very quickly in order to handle everything." While Eddie Van Halen managed to stay clean after Wolfgang convinced him to go to rehab ahead of Van Halen's 2007 tour, he was also battling cancer behind the scenes. In 2017, Eddie was diagnosed with stage 4 lung cancer, and in 2019, he had a stroke. Wolfgang said on The Howard Stern Show, "As time went on, it kept stacking up and stacking up. It just never let up." Watching as his father's health got progressively worse without being able to do anything about it was taxing on Wolfgang. It was during this time Wolfgang wrote a heart-wrenching musical tribute to his father titled Distance, which he played for him. Wolfgang admitted, "We cried. It was hard to sing it and play it through. I was imagining what my life would be like without him and how terribly I'd miss him." Wolfgang eventually put his career on hold to take care of his father. He told People, "I put everything on hold with my album to spend every waking second with my dad." In 2020, Eddie Van Halen lost his battle with cancer. Wolfgang spoke candidly about his father's last days on Behind the Music. He stubbornly kept hoping that his father would recover, despite the odds being stacked against him. He said, "Maybe I was naive and not seeing the writing on the wall, but I was there every day helping him."
Sometimes it was really good. Like, it really did seem like we were going to get through it and it was going to be okay.
But then a devastating phone call came. Wolfgang woke in the middle of the night to a call from his father's doctor, who told him to come to the hospital because Eddie had another stroke. In the episode, Wolfgang finally opened up about his final moments with his dad.
I held my dad's hand. I held it up to my face. until he left.
In the aftermath of his father's death, Wolfgang continued to keep Eddie's legacy alive. While attending the 2022 Grammy Awards, he told People that he still makes music for his dad, saying, "I just do the best I can and make sure I try to make him proud in everything I do." When Eddie Van Halen died, his family knew it would be global news, but when it came to announcing his death publicly, they didn't expect the tabloids to beat them to the punch. This almost happened, and it greatly upset Wolfgang, who wanted to announce his father's death on his own terms. Moments after he said goodbye to his dad for the last time, Eddie's manager called to inform Wolfgang that TMZ already knew about his dad's death. Someone at the hospital had tipped them off, and the story was set to hit the internet any moment. Wolfgang was understandably upset, telling Spin, "I'm in the hospital room and I'm literally sobbing and I have to go through my phone to find a picture of him. Hitting post on Instagram was one of the most painful things. It made it real." Wolfgang kept the announcement short, telling the world that Eddie had finally lost his cancer battle.
I was very happy I was able to spend every second with him that I could.
When you're the son of the legendary Eddie Van Halen and Valerie Bertinelli, you've got quite the legacy to live up to, and Wolfgang felt this pressure for most of his life. He had a fairly happy childhood, but everyone knew who his parents were, and that unnerved him. He told Screamer magazine, "I think people can have unfair expectations about someone that comes from someone that they've seen before. I'm just trying to do my own thing and have a good time doing it." Wolfgang wasn't just putting the pressure on himself. A fan of his dad even accused him on social media of using the Van Halen name to further his career. Wolfgang was puzzled, telling the fan on X, "Van Halen is literally my name." Despite the vitriol he has to deal with in the social media sphere, Wolfgang has managed to let the hate and unfair criticism slide off his back instead of allowing it to consume him. If you ask him whether his legendary father has helped his career at all, he'll tell you that having such a famous dad has been more trouble than it's worth.
I would love people to judge me on my own merits.
When you're as famous as Wolfgang Van Halen, you're bound to be the subject of some disturbing conspiracy theories. There are even some theorists who are convinced that Wolfgang died as a kid and that someone is impersonating him. In one bizarre X post, a person claimed that Wolfgang fell to his death from a balcony. Of course, some of these wild theories have made their way onto the musician's radar, and he handled it in a similar fashion to the trolls on the internet. In 2024, Wolfgang took to Instagram to post the ludicrous theory on his feed, writing, "Chat, am I alive?" The comments provided plenty of entertainment, with one fan writing, "It's official, dude. Sorry you got the news late." In many ways, Wolfgang's ties to his famous parents have been very complicated. However, not everyone sees things that way. Former Van Halen vocalist David Lee Roth has gone on the record saying that Wolfgang is essentially nothing more than a celebrity nepo baby. Speaking in a recorded clip that he later shared on his personal YouTube channel, Roth published a quippy rant that was clearly meant to mock Wolfgang's status as Eddie Van Halen's son.
"I want people to know I got this job because of my talents. I would have had this job anyway, even if my dad wasn't God."
Wolfgang responded to Roth in an interview with the Atlanta-based radio program The Morning X, saying, "I seem to have been born into this Van Halen drama that has come way before me, and I guess now that my dad isn't here to be a target, I guess he went to the next best thing." Ultimately, Wolfgang tries not to let the haters bother him, but that doesn't mean it's easy. After losing his father to cancer, Wolfgang Van Halen found it really difficult to engage with his dad's musical legacy. A lot of the joy that he once felt when listening to Eddie's recordings dissipated and was quickly replaced with sorrow. This made it challenging for Wolfgang to make it through an album. He told Drumeo,
"It's really a tough thing for me. I just don't listen to Van Halen anymore."
Interestingly, the same thing remains true for playing Van Halen songs himself.
It's kind of the same thing with me and with Van Halen stuff. It's like I'm really just not interested in playing it anymore without Dad.
While this may be a disappointment for Van Halen fans who are desperate to hear Eddie's son play the band's greatest hits, the reality is even more tragic for Wolfgang himself. His emotional reaction to his father's death has clearly remained painful and raw. If you or anyone you know needs help with addiction issues, help is available. Visit the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration website or contact SAMHSA's National Helpline at 1-800-662-HELP-4357.